Hello, and welcome to Praxis and Theodicy. This is not the type of video that I ever planned on making. I want to do mostly scripted, edited content, researched content on this channel, but I don't want to let this go by unaddressed. This video is going to relate to the recent, and possibly by the time this is published, still ongoing, goings-on in the United States stock market, including stocks for GameStop and other stocks, AMC, mostly GameStop, and hedge funds and Wall Street. You probably all know what's going on. If you don't, this video isn't the best first one to start with. It's best to go do some research. There's probably some related videos to the side. That being said, the reason I want to do this is because I have an ongoing series on this channel addressing usury, which is an injustice, a financial or economic injustice. It's a sin, as we might say, and it's a common practice in our society. It's an ongoing series that just seeks to address why this is a thing, why it is condemned in the Christian tradition and in the Bible, and yet it's so commonplace today. So I'm getting ahead of myself in this series. The next video was going to address kind of the relationship between usury and capitalism, which mostly addresses the core of capitalism, which is investment capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism is kind of our current capitalist model. And usury is closely related. It's not completely identical to investing and stocks, stock market, etc., that sort of stakeholder capitalism. But it's closely related. And it's kind of weird that all of this is happening to illustrate the fragile nature of the system we have, stakeholder capitalism, and how what it's founded on at its very root is destructive. So anyway, there will be a longer researched, scripted, edited video on that topic, but I figured I needed to address it now as something that demonstrates those flaws is happening right now. So stakeholder capitalism is exactly what we have with the stock market. It's a chance for people with a lot of capital to invest in things that will hopefully produce wealth, and that gives them more wealth because the capital that they've staked on it, invested in it, will be returned to them with greater earnings. Not exactly interest, but that's similar to the model of interest on a loan, which if you've watched our series on usury, you'll know that that's what usury is. So the main difference is that there's some risk involved with the earnings on stocks. One of the problems with this, whether you consider investing and earning money on investing to be ethical or moral or not, whether you consider that in itself to be a sin or not, is something we'll discuss in a video further down. One thing that's a little easier to parse, though, is where it becomes a little separated from investing in an enterprise in order to have a stake in the profit of that enterprise. So you put up your starting capital to help an enterprise to create wealth, and then you get a piece of that wealth. Even if that system was used, and there are systems that encourage that kind of close partnership. We talked about Islam financing in a previous video, and one of the things they do in Islam financing is they don't like speculation, which is kind of it's hard to explain, but it's a form of investing where you don't have a close relationship with the enterprises you're investing in. It's more further removed. Essentially, it's so far removed from the actual businesses that you're building a portfolio. You're essentially no longer investing in businesses. You're just playing games with money. You're treating it more like a gambling game. You're treating the stock market like a casino, which is probably a buzzword you've heard lately a lot. Derogatorily, mostly referring to retail investors. So this is the inevitable outcome of stakeholder capitalism, is that there's this system for people to invest. It becomes this whole thing, this whole market for people to invest in, and the market itself becomes a way to make money. It's very different from earning money. The goal is to invest money in a way that you won't lose it. So it becomes less and less risk and more reward. So eventually you lose the kind of difference from usury in that, there's risk involved. That makes it no longer interest, which makes it no longer usury. So that's one difference. And the main difference is you're not investing capital in the hopes that that capital will help an enterprise produce wealth for themselves and then you get a share. You're just cleverly putting money where you might in order to get more money back. One of the things that you do is manipulate the stock market. So invest in something and try to turn events in such a way that other people invest in it, which drives up the price, so that you earn a profit just because the price is higher, not because the enterprise has made more money, just because the price is higher. So this makes enterprises walk away from the valuation, which is something that is not regulatory in stakeholder capitalism. Valuations are basically assessments of an enterprise, saying like, this is probably the earnings that this enterprise is going to make. There are some things you can invest in that simply can't follow that. Digital currency, Bitcoin, and etc. Those things don't make a profit. They're not enterprises. They're just valued at what people are willing to pay for it. So if they become popular, more people will buy into it, and it just becomes more valuable because people want it more. It's not a useful thing per se. It's useful as a tool for trading wealth, but it's not an enterprise that's going to earn wealth and earn profit. Sometimes there can be an enterprise which does earn wealth, but it's clearly overvalued. Tesla is a good example of this. Elon Musk fully admits that Tesla is valued way higher than it should be. It's valued at hundreds of dollars per share, and they don't make enough profit to really justify that. And that happens in the stock market. Things are bought and sold, shares of companies are bought and sold for way more than their valuation says they should be worth. Because the valuations that are done are just advice, pretty much. So when things are valued more, that's a result of manipulation. It's people buying in and then artificially inflating the price through their influence. Mostly influence, like it'll be a hedge fund that is a guiding post for the stock market. Hedge fund that people tend to follow. So if the hedge fund invests in Tesla, this hedge fund has a reputation for good predictions. So more buyers will follow that and buy into it, and that will inflate the price of whatever it is that the hedge fund originally invested in. When you get a few of these hedge fund managers, they have kind of dinners, get-togethers, private, not public, where they can discuss what stocks they like, what stocks they're gonna, start buying into. If enough of them get on board with one or the other, and they start investing in those that will drive the market in a certain direction. You also have people publicly stating on Twitter or television what stocks they like, and that manipulates public perception and gets people buying more into those things or selling those things. And this manipulates the stock market. Now, with free speech, etc. Like, you can't exactly say that's wrong. So it's a tough game, seeing where manipulation of the stock market, is a thing that should be punished or stopped or regulated. So what's happening now is a manipulation, but not in the traditional way that it's always happened. Market manipulation has happened with, as I said, hedge fund managers who have private servers or private get-togethers, and they can discuss what stocks they want to invest in, and that will inevitably affect the market, so that when those stocks rise, not because those companies are going to be more profitable or are more profitable, but simply because interest in the stocks has driven the price up. That allows them to get the earnings. What we're seeing now is that is kind of happening, but not in a private setting, in a very public setting, in a very open, just free-for-all setting. It's kind of like the difference between in the 80s, 90s, and older, when people went door-to-door selling encyclopedias. And when Wikipedia became a thing, it's just anyone can access it. It's just there, no profit motive, just want people to have access to information. Information is a big driving factor in how the stock market works, how you can approach it. And this is just freely shared information. What that resulted in is a breadth of manipulation that can equal the manipulation by very powerful people and very wealthy people that keep that power in a small circle. There's a very large circle of very underpowered people who combined have the power to manipulate the stock market in their favor. So essentially, it's something very close to what's always been happening, just in a very, very different light. And it's a response to some market manipulation by hedge fund managers that had been ongoing for like a year or more. Hedge fund managers were trying to manipulate the price of GameStop down because they had short sold it. They had basically betted that it would fail, so they were trying to make it fail. And that manipulation was happening slowly over a long time, and people started betting that would result in I'm not sure, it would result in a failure somehow. They noticed that they had short sold it to an extent that they had actually bet on stocks that were over 100% of the available stocks of GameStop, and this was the nail on the coffin. They knew that this would force them to have to sell sometime. So if they could drive the price up, then it would force them to buy the stocks back from them at a very, very high price, and they would lose money. And the money would go to, roughly all the people who had banded together to drive the stocks up. So a lot's been talked about. What it essentially boils down to is people are indignant at who is manipulating the stock market. The wrong people are getting rich off of this. It's people who generally shouldn't have as much power as they do, and they only have that amount of power because they've banded together. They've combined their power in enough of a way that they can go toe-to-toe with people who have enough wealth and power to do this on the regular. There's a lot of talk about solidarity, which is one of the main things that I want to talk about. There's a lot of talk between the right and the left about solidarity, between the two. There are a lot of talking heads, pundits from both sides of the aisle praising what is going on in the public on Reddit, Wall Street Bets, which is where this originated, and condemning things like Congress possibly acting quickly to regulate this sort of thing, when in the past, when this was done, and it tanked the market in 2008. Not a lot was done. In fact, they were the hedge fund managers were bailed out, and that's coming from pundits on both sides of the aisle. There's also talk of condemnation of trading platforms like Robinhood, which are available to the average everyday person, what was called retail investors, because those apps and platforms kind of shut themselves down. It was going crazy, and they shut themselves down, which is kind of, you can understand why they did it, but it disenfranchised. It immediately depowered thousands of people, tens of thousands. I don't know how many people are involved in this mass trading, but it depowered all of them instantly, which is a huge no. You can see why they did it, because it was volatile and they were scared, but they disenfranchised and depowered tons of people, possibly costing those people tons of money, which is very scary. There's no two ways about it. So there's a lot of condemnation on that. I want to talk a little, I guess, from my position. This is a leftist channel, so I want to address the solidarity that's formed between the right and the left. It's also a Christian channel, so I want to talk about the Christians' response at the end, or at least my response. I tend to sympathize more with libertarian leftist positions. Anarchism is kind of the extreme libertarian left position, mostly extreme libertarian. There's, I guess, anarcho-communism would be the extreme libertarian left. Regardless, there's a lot of sentiment of solidarity between the right and left right now, because the right, especially in America, tends to, on many things, lean more towards libertarian right. And there's a lot of sympathy from the right in America for the working class people. If you talk to the average conservative, that will be their argument, that they believe the Republican Party fights harder for the working class. And that's a whole video in itself. But that's why a lot of pundits on the right are taking this side. They like to, garner favor from the small guy. So they don't like the big guy hitting down on the small guy in this instance. Now, party politics and actual policies, and who favors policies that help the ultra rich and not necessarily the working class or small time investor, all that aside, we'll just say that this is essentially what you would see as praxis if it came from of extreme libertarian right, an anarcho-capitalist, someone who is far right and far libertarian, who's just sticking it to the man. And that's, I don't know, there's a lot to be said about that. I've also seen in a lot of anarchist forums that what's going on is praxis, because it's just really upending the system. It's showing the cracks in the system, and it's sticking it to the most disruptive, hostile forces in America, the elite 1% on Wall Street, who have a practice and a profession of hoarding wealth by taking wealth from smaller labor class people and consolidating it into the portfolios of the most wealthy clients. And I understand that is an extremely frustrating system that we live with. But the people that were originally involved in this on Wall Street bets, they're not a bunch of anarchists who are just trying to break the system. They are at best anarcho-capitalists, or just whatever capitalists. They're all capitalists. That's their common ground is they love investing. They love the craziness of it. They really just want to be full into investment capitalism. Whereas a true anarchist wouldn't be on that train in the beginning. They would, in the beginning, be working to build dual power structures, build mutual aid networks, to just live in a way. There's an anarchist phrase: anarchism is about living like you're already free. So it would be living in a way that you aren't a part of that system, that you aren't dependent on investment capitalism to, earn your living or gain wealth. Like, you don't want to sit in an armchair and earn wealth through a portfolio and through clever investing and betting on the stock market. You want to earn wealth through mutual aid. You want to earn wealth by building a community and making sure that your cooperation with your fellow human beings through solidarity and through affinity will build wealth for you and your community, because cooperation is more powerful than isolation. And so the people who are involved from the beginning aren't doing this out of some anarchist praxis. Even if they were all anarcho-capitalists, they're not doing it necessarily to bring down the system that they're against. If they're anarcho-capitalists, they want a completely free market, one that's not regulated, which that's something we can talk about. This is probably going to result in regulation, but that's a bigger conversation that we won't talk about right now. An anarcho-capitalist wants a free market where everyone can compete. Their ultimate goal isn't to change the system, it's just to be the one on top. They're already fighting in a king of the hill, and that's what they want society to be. They want it to be a society of free competition. They want it to be a constant king of the hill, and they want to be the ones on top. And they want a system where they can have people below them, which is what they already have, but they are the ones on the bottom, and they're just fighting to get on top. They're not doing this to change the system. They're doing it because they see an exploit in the system and they see the chance to get on top. If they're true anarcho-capitalists, they would probably be worried about this, because they would say, oh, this is probably going to result in regulation, and anarcho-capitalists would not like that. So the question remains, what is going on? Is it praxis in any way? Should you participate? Should we as Christians or leftists participate? Should we, rather than participate, should we encourage or cheer on? So there's a lot of complications here. Praxis is living out your beliefs. It's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. A Christian living out Christian praxis should really just look at the life of Jesus, look at how he reacted to everything he encountered, to the marginalized, injustice in the world. Sometimes that included the blasphemous money changers setting up not only a business and a way of life that was very opposed to what God taught us in the Old Testament, but doing it in the temple courtyard, making it just a business that extracted wealth from the marginalized without really any labor. They were money changers. They were just making a little interest off the top from changing money. And to do that in the temple grounds was to not only bring that in and, act unjustly through economic means, but doing it kind of in the name of Yahweh. So, yeah, Jesus wasn't very happy about that. So we can see some praxis in turning out, especially Christians who carry out economic injustice, because they're doing it at least a little in the name of Jesus, and that is blasphemous. So we can see a little bit of maybe turning over the money changers here. Honestly, and my series on Usury would get to this eventually, but as much as it may be a matter of personal conscience for Christians, individual Christians, whether or not to invest in the stock market and stuff like that, it's another step to do kind of the speculation that is involved not only with these hedge funds, but in Wall Street bets. That's stock market speculation. It's not just investing, it's speculation, which is still a matter of personal conscience, but it's a little more on the side of, well, you should really think about that. As a body, Christians shouldn't be doing this really as Christians. That is, like, a church shouldn't be investing, I don't think, and a church shouldn't be encouraging or being involved in what's going on with Wall Street bets. And individual Christians should consider what they think the end goal of this will be. Is it likely to bring down the system inside capitalism, the one that capitalism is based on, that is inherently exploitative? That is the system that is just based off of moving wealth from one party to the other, and is built such that those with more wealth have a advantage in that system. And thus, it's a system that extracts wealth from the poor and puts it in the hands of the wealthy. If you think that these actions are going to result in a decimation of that system, then you can be justified that this is praxis, that this is bringing down, because it's putting aside a definition of violence that would encapsulate this. It's not physical violence. A Christian shouldn't be advocating for something like violent revolution. So this is an alternative to that. But there's a big portion of this that people are in it for the money, and a Christian and an anarchist should not be in it for the money. So there has to be a consideration there. Only if you really believe that this will result in bringing down the system would you be justified in partaking in this. If you are a social democrat, a democratic socialist, or a leftist who is even further up on the authoritarian scale, and you believe this will result in further regulations of capitalism, so even if you're a neoliberal, honestly, your mindset is, capitalism is whatever. If you're a neoliberal, capitalism is great, but the government's job, the state's job, is to just put some boundaries on it wherever it shows cracks. And that, I think, is a likely result of this. You can, complain that it didn't result in regulations in 2008 or any of the other bubbles when hedge fund managers were causing it, but it will now. You can complain and point out the hypocrisy there and still see the end goal of more regulation as a good thing. I personally believe that capitalism at its core is not a system that results in a just society, but it's not going to collapse from this, I don't believe. But it might be regulated. And I'm torn on that. Regulation will extend the life of capitalism. If you believe that capitalism will eventually self-implode, then every step of regulating it will keep it alive a little longer, because people will be more tolerant of it. So is regulation a bad thing because it keeps capitalism alive? Well, I mean, yeah, but it's also a good thing because it keeps capitalism from doing an ongoing, from further disenfranchising people, from further extracting wealth, and separating people from their wealth and putting it into the hands of the already wealthy. And I'm not exactly an accelerationist, so I don't really like the mindset of, well, you know what, I would rather see capitalism grow until it collapses in on itself, and because society is just so hurting that it causes a revolution because everyone's hurting. An accelerationist would be like, yes, the more people hurting, the more it'll be likely that we as a society will actually do something to the bad things happening. I have sympathies for that, but I also just want to see justice done today. I don't want to put things off till tomorrow. I don't want people hurting now so that they might do something. I want people inspired by empathy and by information. And just honestly, I want to know how to inspire people, even if they're not suffering, to inspire people to make the world a better place. And that's hard. It's extremely hard. I'm definitely not suffering now. I'm in a pretty good financial position. I'm comfortable, stable. But as a Christian and as a leftist, or as inspired by the politics of the last 4 or 5 years in my country, I've been inspired to make some change as best I can, and I'm still looking for more ways to do it without suffering. And I know that a lot of people work in their self-interest, and they won't be motivated to, work together to form mutual aid societies, or to form dual power structures, form ways to survive and help each other without a capitalist system based on the profit motive and based on markets that serve the wealthiest. It's hard for people to do that if they're not, motivated to do it by a threat to their self-existence and their self-interest. But it's possible. It's at very least possible through Christ. And I've seen that it is possible, maybe rare. It's rare among Christians and among secular people. Christians often act in their self-interest, and they act to perpetuate a system that encourages greed. But I think with more knowledge and more empathy, then more people can be inspired to create a better world. So it may happen that this will cause more suffering. It may happen that it will cause people to see why capitalism needs to be changed or needs to go. But I don't think directly that this is Christian or leftist praxis. It's people in it for money, and they happen to be threatening big money. The stock market, as I said in the beginning, is a way for money to transfer. It's been rigged for money to transfer from the least wealthy to the most, from the entrepreneurs who need startup capital. It's a way for extracting wealth from them and putting it into the hands of people who are already wealthy enough. And now the lowest class of people are figuring out just one little exploit to transfer wealth from the wealthiest down to the lowest classes. And there are some wealthy people getting more wealthy off of this too. There are definitely hedge funds, some of the biggest hedge funds, who are invested in GameStop, not shorting it. So don't fool yourself that this is only a transfer of wealth from the wealthiest to the poorest. It's not. But in the end, it doesn't matter. It's still just a game to transfer wealth from one set of people to another. And just like a violent revolution against state violence and state authority will only create another society that perpetuates that violence, this sort of taking back, this sort of Robin Hood, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, if that does enact change or a whole revolution against the system, it's just going to set other people up. It's showing them that, stealing wealth is what this new revolution is basing itself on. So it's not going to make a new system where stealing wealth isn't a thing anymore. It's just another way of people stealing wealth from each other. And it's not a revolution. It's not going to result in that. It's probably going to result in regulation. If you are libertarian, leftist, or rightist, you shouldn't love regulation that much. Most leftists should probably like regulation a little, especially in the stock market. And honestly, if the stock market is still going to be a thing, even as a Christian anarchist, if the stock market's a thing, I want it regulated as much as it can be. I would love to see a regulation that says you cannot short a company further than 100% of its stock, which is what led to this. I would love to see a regulation that says you can't short a company like over 75% or even 50% of its stock. And I would, even further than that, I would love to see a regulation that says shorting should not be a thing at all. Short selling is not investing in companies, in enterprises, to give them some startup capital for them to create wealth, to create a better society. Short selling is not that. Short selling is betting on the market to make money. That's all short selling is. That's the only purpose behind it. Short selling is not like the goal of capitalism to, kind of capture the wealth of the wealthy, to inspire them to invest in entrepreneurs and enterprises and inventors that can create a better world, and inspire them to do this by giving them an incentive and saying, hey, you can have some of the money back. That's what, like, capitalism at its best is a way of capturing the greed of humans and getting them to invest in a something that makes a better world. This is not even capitalism at its best, most altruistic. And if that description sounded like a great system, you're looking at it wrong, because it's still a terrible system. It's still a system based on greed. But like crossing your fingers and knocking on wood, it's a system that maybe can create a better world. And short selling is not a part of that system. So I would be very, very happy if, at the very least, we can regulate short selling, because that would set a precedent of regulating away just the habits of speculation, market speculation. That's not capitalism at its best. It's the worst form of stakeholder capitalism. It's where money itself becomes a thing that you can make money with. And that's bad on the surface, because it becomes a way where you're not creating a better society. You're just playing games with money and trying to find a way to move the money in society into your hands, into fewer and fewer hands, until it's all in yours. It's just greed. Market speculation is not a good thing for a healthy society, let alone talking about Christian ethics and stuff. So any way I can think of to regulate and decrease the fact of the market being a place for speculation would be great. I would love to see that regulated out. Just regulate out the very things that can even cause you to speculate on the market. If that were so, I would be more willing to advise Christians to say, okay, investment is not the worst thing. It's a matter of personal conscience. If you want to take some of your wealth and help, someone else create a better world through their entrepreneurship, through their enterprises, and if you want to do it in a system where you get a piece of that wealth without your labor, I would still advise them, like, labor is still God's way of getting wealth. It's still what God wants us to do, and trying to make wealth without your labor is not a great thing. You should think about that. But, you're not speculating. You are creating a better world by helping out someone. But as it stands now, I really have trouble advising Christians that investing in the stock market is a great thing to do to earn wealth, to make money. Lots of people have retirement accounts and saving accounts, and unfortunately in our world, if you don't have that, you're just not going to survive. So I can't advise Christians to do that. But if we regulate away market speculation, I would feel much better in telling Christians that it's a matter of personal conscience. As it is now, it's just not. One last thing to end on. I saw this on social media. It might be a tweet. I'll put it on screen so you can see the credit. And I'll just read it out loud. It's something to think about. Jillian says, the problem with capitalism is that if you aren't born into wealth, your only capital is your labor. So automatically, your human body is now a commodity that you must sell. And if you can't sell it for enough, you won't be able to care for it, and you will lose your capital. There's a lot going on in there. At the end, it kind of makes a statement about healthcare. But I want to focus on more in the beginning that capitalism is a system that favors people who already have capital. That's its goal. It wants to prop up people with capital because, propping up them will hopefully inspire them to help the market by investing in things and creating a better world. It's a system that favors people who already have capital. And that means if you are born without capital, if you're born not into wealth, the only capital you have is yourself, and you have to use yourself to labor to earn money. And that is the system that God sets up in Genesis for humans to do, to work, to labor, to create a better world. And throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, if you've watched the videos on Usury, you understand that the systems that man creates to earn money without labor is not encouraged very strongly in the Bible. That's what capitalism is. It's giving power to capitalists, that is people who already have capital, to be able to earn more capital without labor. And if you don't have that, all you have is labor, but you're also born into a system where your labor usually only gets you enough to keep yourself alive and keep your labor going. It hardly ever gets you to a point where you can actually earn more and better your station in life, increase your wealth, because what your labor is worth isn't actually what it's tangibly worth. It's not what it earns. It's dictated, the worth of your labor is dictated by the people with capital. It's given to you in wages. You don't get to earn the full cost or the full product of your labor. You get to earn whatever wages a capitalist tells you they are willing to give you. And it is structured such that you cannot get ahead very easily or at all by your labor alone. You get ahead by investing in real estate or the stock market or something. That's what Wall Street Bets is doing now. They found a way to finally get ahead by investing, not by their labor, but like they found an exploit. So I don't condone that. I don't condone doing this to get rich. I condone laboring, even though you know it won't get you ahead in this system. But laboring, and with any free time you have, working to inspire other people to create a better world, working to form dual power structures and mutual aid societies. That is, forming networks where people cooperate together in order to become stronger than the system that has a top-down power structure, a hierarchical power structure, where people who already are born into wealth get to dictate how much the labor of the working class is worth. That's a bad system. It sucks for a lot of people. But don't seek to use that system to exploit it to get ahead. Seek to work humbly to live a quiet and humble life, to labor, and to spend extra time and energy to create these networks, dual power structures, to compete with the current power structures. Work as best you can, keep the faith, and do praxis.